Jakarta, Indonesia.
US-China dialogue. El Nino is back. English in a minute, couch potato.
MLINE Top 3 Updates powered by VOA, Voice of America.
The U.S. officials continue effort to build a dialogue with China even as U.S. lawmakers heard serious warnings about threat to cybersecurity. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson wrapped this up about the U.S.-China relations.
Amid strained communication lines between Washington and Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping welcoming former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger to China. Xi noted that Kissinger, who turned 100 in May, has visited China more than 100 times since the 1970s.
The relations between our two countries would be central to the peace in the world.
U.S. climate envoy John Kerry also in Beijing, restoring dialogue on environmental issues after China suspended those talks last August in response to then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan.
We all hope nothing will get in the way of our ability to deal with the climate crisis because, as I said previously, it doesn't wait for these things.
And U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who visited China last week, now in Vietnam talking about the U.S. approach.
We are actively trying to promote greater resilience in our supply chains, and that doesn't mean doing everything ourselves, and it doesn't mean, in our case, ending our, in any way, trading relations with China. But we do want to partner with more countries.
China's ambassador to the U.S. telling the Aspen Security Forum Wednesday his country is not seeking conflict with the United States.
China is opposed to any kind of trade war, technological war under the pretext of competition. China do not shy away from competition, but the definition of competition by the U.S. side, I think is not fair.
But the White House telling VOA Thursday military-to-military communication remains closed.
You want to be able to pick up the phone and talk to your opposite and try to take the tensions down and to avoid miscalculation. When you have that kind of military hardware sailing so close together, flying so close together, the potential for miscalculation and risk only shoot up if you can't talk to one another.
U.S. lawmakers heard warnings earlier this week from top energy officials that China posed a serious threat to the energy grid and cybersecurity, drawing a rebuke from the Chinese Foreign Ministry.
The U.S. should not make unfounded accusations or smear other countries for political purposes, but should stop cyber attacks on others and strengthen international cooperation to earnestly safeguard cybersecurity.
The U.S. Senate began debate this week on the massive annual defense bill that contains several China-related provisions.
These investments strengthen our warfighting advantages, exploit adversary vulnerabilities, and address critical operational challenges in the Indo-Pacific. They provide capabilities that will serve to strengthen our combat-credible deterrent by ensuring we can prevail in conflict.
China expected to be a top issue next week when Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin traveled to the Indo-Pacific region. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Every few years, the Pacific Ocean gets a fever and the symptoms spread all the way around the world. It is happening again. El Nino is back and it looks like it's going to be a big one. That raises an odd drought in Brazil and Southern Africa and floods in East Africa and the southern United States.
It's happening again. El Nino is back and it looks like it's going to be a big one.
What I see really looks very concerning to me, Steve. I'm seeing really warm sea surface temperatures in the equatorial East Pacific that would be indicative of a strong El Nino.
A strong El Nino can mean big consequences. So why do warm seas in one place mess with the weather worldwide? The sun heats up the water. Normally, winds from the east push that warm water into the western Pacific.
So you have this huge worm pool that straddles the Indo-Pacific Ocean around the maritime continent of Indonesia. And this is where, rising motion occurs and cloud formation, heavy rainfall.
It's like a pair of conveyor belts fitted with leaky buckets. They lift humid air and dump rain. What goes up must come down. On the downside of the conveyor belt, the buckets are empty. Dry air descends over the Arabian Sea, and on the eastern belt, dry air descends over the eastern Pacific. But every 3 to 5 years or so, the winds that push the Pacific hotspot west, they get weaker. That's the first stage of El Nino.
With an El Nino, the warmest water in the Pacific shifts to the east, and this produces ascending motion over that warm water in the central Pacific, but then descending motion over the maritime continent.
The descending conveyor belts with their empty buckets dry out Southeast Asia. To the east, dry air descends over northern South America. That means a risk of drought, crop losses, and wildfires in both places. But the impacts don't stop there.
When that descending motion reaches the surface, it diverges. That is, some of it goes back towards the Pacific, but some goes into the Indian Ocean. And that diverging air mass at the surface is tending to push warm water towards the Western Indian Ocean.
Rising from the Western Indian Ocean, warm water conveyor belts dump heavy rain on Somalia, Kenya, and eastern Ethiopia. That's good news. After 5 failed rainy seasons, the region is on the brink of famine. But too much rain is not good either.
We would want them to have good rain, abundant rainfall, enough to replenish the reservoirs, and also that it's healthy for the crops. But frequent flooding gonna definitely be a problem.
While East Africa faces floods, it's a different story to the northwest and south.
It's very likely that we'll see suppressed rain over northern Ethiopia and potentially another really strong drought like we had in 2015. And then, if that persists, we could also see a drought over southeastern Africa, as we saw in 2016.
It depends how long El Nino lasts and how strong it gets. We'll know later this year. They usually last 9 to 12 months and peak between October and February. These forecasts are not guarantees. The weather is complicated, but El Nino raises the odds of extremes in much of the world.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A couch is for sitting, and a potato is for eating. But what is a couch potato?
Dan, how is your new roommate?
He's such a couch potato. He comes home from work and watches weird shows all night.
Well, it could be worse.
Could it? He watches Norwegian zombie films on very loud speakers.
Sounds like this man needs some headphones and maybe a new interest.
A couch potato is someone who spends a lot of time sitting and watching television. Be careful using this expression. It's like calling someone lazy. It's not a good thing to be called a couch potato. And that's English in a Minute.
The Voice of America, VOA.
Charlie Big Potato, Skunk and Nancy.
Thank you very much for being with us on MLINE Top 3 Updates powered by VOA Voice of America. We'll be seeing you soon, but do not forget to check out the Insta story of Instagram at mirzawardana to see some shopping recommendation. And